Alrighty, hello, my friends, welcome. I've left the lemon rind in my lemon tea, which is always dangerous. I'll end up with it down the front. Welcome. Today's date, 13th of December here in New Zealand. It's still the 12th of the 12th. In many parts of the world, it's 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. Guess what? I'm back. As you can't tell from the background that I'm back at home. After 6 or 7 weeks away in the Americas, Ecuador, Galapagos Islands, Costa Rica for a retreat, hosting a retreat that is, and then Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula specifically. And we're home as of 3 or 4 days now. So should be getting back into the swing of things here, although I can't say that I feel particularly settled here yet. And then we're off to Marie's mother's in a couple of days. There's no rest for the wicked. It seems the life of a gypsy is upon me. Anyways, what am I here to say? It's Chat with Matt here, half an hour to chat about whatever might be going on for you, whatever you might want to know about or get my opinion on, our opinion. Of course, it's just Matt talking to you, it seems, but I am intending to be in a mode that is more channeled than personally opinionated. Although it's hard to tell. It is hard to tell. We've never been one to make it very obvious when we are channeling and when we are not. So that's just that. Not here particularly to get into the reasons for that right now, unless people really want to know. I am going to attempt, just to refresh on this, to find the page. I know Jen Burns, because I saw it on my phone this morning before I had my shower, asked about that's the wrong thing. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Asked about money, which is an awesome topic because yesterday I did 2 personal sessions and both of them ended up talking or at least deeply entangled with this topic of money. And I noticed while I was traveling, particularly this last phase through Mexico, how money was coming up for me a lot, which I don't particularly enjoy. It's not my intention to be money orientated, money focused, but it's interesting how it rears its ugly head. Lack mentality. Oh, that's more expensive than I was expecting. That's more expensive than I think it's really worth, etc., right? Which is, common these days. Everything seems to be, quote unquote, more expensive than at least it was, and therefore what we think it should be. And then we start, getting contracted, stressed about money, which is never particularly useful if we want to live an empowered life, an expansive life in abundance consciousness. So money's a tricky one. I'll read what Jen asked so that I'm more specific. Can you talk about money as spiritually orientated beings, which is an interesting label and term? How can we come into a more empowered relationship with money? The more empowered relationship with money is a more neutral relationship with money. A relationship where we don't focus so much on money, but rather think more in terms of energy. More in terms of, a lot of people think that money is really important, but ultimately, in my opinion, what's much more valuable is attention. I know a lot of people would think time, but it's really attention, because our attention is what really morphs time. Time can stretch. It's your attention that's important, because you can, quote unquote, waste a lot of time if you're not really being attentive to anything. And in a very short amount of time, you can get an incredible amount of value if you are focused with your attention on what is present. So time itself is not a very good measure of what's valuable. Right? Well, time itself is not valuable in and of itself, like clock time, the ticking clock. the amount of seconds or the amount of hours or the amount of days or the amount of months or the amount of years is not particularly important. It's how are you using that time, how are you attentive to that time. Now, money is another form of energy, just like attention is a form of energy, really, in some ways. Attention is what you are directing your energy towards. Money gives us the opportunity, or money is a way of storing energy, really. It's a way of storing potential. You can work, quote unquote, to earn money, which you can then store for an amount of time, which is sort of indefinite, except inflation starts to eat away at it, which is an interesting concept too. Not outside of the bounds of natural law, really, the idea of inflation and the fact that our money becomes less worth the longer we store it, hoard it, keep it static. But anyway, the idea of money is that we can change energy, we can exchange energy in a way that is more efficient. E.g., if you want the goods from someone, you don't necessarily need to pay them directly with your time, energy, or your own goods or services. You can give them money instead, which you have earned by serving someone else. So it's this medium of exchange that makes the process of exchanging energy more efficient. That's all it is, right? Unfortunately, as quote unquote spiritual beings, people who have been more interested in our relationship with all that is, which is quote unquote spirit, God, source, right? We've been more interested in our deeper relationships with life itself, which is spiritual, have been indoctrinated over many successive generations now, centuries, even millennia, that money is a bad thing, that money takes you away from God's source universe. It's a distraction. It creates greed, etc. Right? There's been all sorts of programs around the improperness of money. Another good one is that you shouldn't earn money, or you shouldn't charge money for using your spiritual gifts. That's an interesting one. What, pray tell, is not a spiritual gift? Is the banker not using their spiritual gifts to accurately account for money? Is the baker not using their spiritual gifts to create delicious bread or whatever, right? Is the artist not using their spiritual gifts to create works of art that are appreciated? How come healers or facilitators are somehow labelled with this idea that you shouldn't charge for using your spiritual gifts because they're coming from God? Everything comes from God, right? It's a crazy concept, and yet it is very, very still alive in many circles. I still get that reflected back to me by people, right, that say you shouldn't charge money for channeling because it's a gift from God. It's like, oh yeah, okay. So what do you do? What do you do with your life? And why is that not a gift from God? And you seem pretty okay about charging money for what you do. Hey, Sister Susie. But this is these types of programs are still out there, and still very influential in our sphere of reference in our lives. And so how do we come into a more empowered relationship with money? Well, one, we have to be aware that what we are dealing with, what's creating the resistance, why it's difficult for people like us generally to charge appropriately, to feel worthy of having money, using money, because without that awareness, it's very difficult to make conscious choice to step beyond the resistance that's created, right? I'm not a big one in thinking that you need to fix something first and then you have the result, right? So I'm not one to say, well, you have to heal your, relationship, or you have to release these past life indoctrinations or programs or beliefs that happens automatically as you choose to keep applying your conscious intent. Right, so if your conscious intent is to have a more empowered relationship with money, you will move towards having a more empowered relationship with money. It might feel like a bit of a battle, because when you hold a conscious intent to overcome something that's been creating resistance or limitation in your life, that resistance or limitation appears to get stronger, becomes more intense, because now you are sort of creating a focus on it by choosing the opposite of it. So we see this all the time. People who have become, hey, Sister Jen, I am in the midst of answering your question or suggestion around money. So people who have been, habituated to a fear and choose to overcome a fear tend to see that fear come up more strongly in their life as they are working through the process of overcoming its influence. If you choose to feel more safe in the world, you tend to have all of your doubts come up, etc., etc. This is a normal part of a healing process that we see time and time again. So, so when it comes to working with money, I think the most important way to come into a more empowered relationship with money is to choose to do just that, consciously choose. Not from a sort of a wanting, needy space where we are lacking money and therefore we need to fix this problem, but from a empowered place of alignment with the joy that we are, alignment with the being that we are, recognizing that the ability to utilize money more effectively would further enhance our ability to be influential in the world, expressive in the world. It would give us greater opportunity to express our divine beingness out there, right? Our expansive truth. So from a place of joy, from a place of passion, from a place of desire to be more of ourselves, we consciously choose to maintain awareness around how we are being limited by money and hold an intentional space that we can utilize money more effectively. And then we just have to be willing to go through the process. Then we need to be willing to sort of butt heads with the limitations that keep coming up. Quite often I've found when I've really got intentional on breaking free and lifting the ceiling on how much I can attract in terms of money, then almost immediately I get some sort of pushback in some way. Like someone will send me an email and basically tell me that I'm very bad and wrong for charging for my services, etc., right? Which has happened several times, or more than several times, over the last, while. So rather than getting upset by that confrontation, someone confronting you around the wrongness of using money for spiritual endeavors, I choose to see it as a good sign, right? I choose to see it as an opportunity. Can I relax through this and see this as a representation of an old program that I'm choosing to expand out of, and see this pseudo protest as an opportunity for me to breathe deep and not to get entrenched in or embroiled in, entangled in fighting now against this, not needing to type back and tell them how wrong they are for telling me I'm wrong for charging for my services. Can I not just let that go and see it as old energy showing itself as it is being released, right? Because if I need to prove myself against someone else, then obviously I am basically reinforcing my own doubts. That's the point, right? If I can just smile and let it go and think, oh, that's an awesome opportunity for me to maintain peace and expand out of this program, then the better off I'm going to be, right? The more freedom I am basically claiming if I don't choose to fight against these old programs, right? Because when you fight against something, you basically feed it. That's what a lot of people don't understand. I talk often about this sort of activist mindset, people who want to fight for the climate, fight for the whales, fight for this and that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be interested in and advocate for these various topics, right? Fighting for human rights. But when we choose to fight against what we perceive as the persecutor, what we perceive as the wrongdoer, we are feeding that wrongdoer or that persecutor. So that The delicate balance is being able to advocate for the outcome that you want without getting enmeshed in a fight against what you perceive is wrong. The actions might look rather similar, right? You can still walk down the street waving placards and chanting, but it's all comes down to the energy behind your intentional outcome, right? Are you intending to make the bad doers wrong and make them pay? Or are you intending to advocate for the outcome that would be more expansive than what is currently happening? I think Mother Teresa said, I'll never go to an anti-war rally, but if you invite me to a peace vigil, I'm there, right? She'll go to a peace vigil, but not an anti-war rally, because anti-war rallies don't work. That's the point. So it's the same so that's the activist mindset, but we all carry that to some degree, and we all get embroiled in that when we're dealing with any particular topic that's influencing our lives. Can we get out of this mentality that we're fighting against our lack mentality, and can we get into, I'm advocating for abundance consciousness. I'm consciously choosing abundance consciousness from a space of love rather than from a space of fear. We're not doing it because we need to fix our lack mentality because we are sick and tired of being poor all the time, right? Because that doesn't work. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just the simple fact that it doesn't work, right? So it's not a righteous thing here. It's a practicality of what is a much more effective way of moving forward. And so the more that you can focus on the outcome you desire, the more that you can align energetically with the outcome you desire, not just wanting it, not just talking in this lack mentality way about abundance consciousness, but actually aligning with abundance consciousness, living from it, choosing to be as abundant as you can within the means that you currently are experiencing, right? So some of us don't have as much money as we might like, but we can still choose to live as abundantly as possible within that limited framework. It doesn't matter how much money you have, right? You can always find limitations. Some very, very wealthy people on this planet are still in lack mentality, right? They're still hoarding their money. They're still scared of running out of money, even though they have billions of dollars potentially, right? And others who have next to nothing are living a very abundant life because they recognize that it's not about the quantity of money, it's about the attitude with which you are moving. So, Susie said, such a fine balance with everything in this regard at the moment. I'm constantly checking myself with my intentions and pulling back into my heart space when I get pulled into into feeding unwanted energy. Yeah, and that's exactly how it should be, Susie. That's not unusual, and you're not failing. That is the process, right? It is always going to be a to and fro. The protest will always keep coming up and taking your attention, and you don't need to get this even 80% right? It's not about there's no real percentage on how much attention you need to apply to your outcome in order for it to be successful. Just small improvements, right? Every little step in that direction is useful. So that's it. Em said we can practice abundance with money, being consciously mindful and grateful as we spend and where we spend in the moment. Yeah, exactly, Em. Exactly. And one of the things that I like about travel is in many other cultures, because here in New Zealand and in Australia, right, tipping is not a thing. But in many other parts of the world, it is, right? So this tipping thing is very, very interesting because you're basically at choice as to how much money you give someone for the service that they've provided you, e.g. bringing your food to the table or pouring you a drink or driving you in a taxi, etc. And so it's very easy, especially from our mindset where we think the price is the price and I've paid the price, why should I pay any more? And why aren't these restaurants paying their servers a living wage, etc., right? All of this mentality going on in their head. But at the end of the day, the person who's bringing you the food needs money to survive, and you are the one who's providing that for them, right? Very few servers get rich on tips. That's the truth, right? It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Except maybe some of them who are working in high-end resorts in America or somewhere like that, where there's a lot of rich Americans there who like to throw their money around. So it comes down to this idea of how much money do I give this person, what's appropriate, and what do I feel in my heart, and then battling with the idea that, well, that's a little bit too much, for me, right? It's a really enjoyable, I found it a really enjoyable practice in places like Bali and Vietnam, and places where I was comparatively rich. My New Zealand dollars were converting to a lot of their currency, and for what is just a few dollars for me is actually a significant amount of money for them, right, in their economy. And so I very much enjoy being what appears to be for them very generous in those countries, right? I love that feeling of being able to tip people generously when I can afford it. And then when you're in places like Tulum in Mexico, where prices are already very high in American dollars, and compared to the New Zealand dollar, then tipping becomes much more of a challenge, right? Much more of a challenge for me to get over my lack mentality, converting it to New Zealand dollars and saying, wow, I'm just tipping them, several hours of work at home for bringing me a couple of plates of food, right? But at the same time, the issue comes down to, that doesn't matter to them what it's costing me. The point is they need money to live, and can I provide that from an open-hearted space, right, without putting myself into contraction and without sending myself bankrupt. So it's an interesting dance. I found it very interesting inquiring around my relationship with money and my relationship with this process called tipping, depending on how much money I had to spend to do it, right? Very happy to do it in some cultures where I felt it was affordable, not so happy to do it in cultures or situations where I felt I was being ripped off, right? Now, they're only numbers that are changing here. It's only numbers that are changing here. The actual vibration behind the whole process is exactly the same if I can stay in neutrality. But the point is, I have beliefs around what's appropriate and what's inappropriate based on what I've been brought up with to consider fair value, which doesn't matter in any other part of the world. It only matters here where I am, what I consider fair value, because that's where that's where this economy makes sense, right? That's where these values are quote unquote normalized. In other parts of the world, it's not normal at all, right? So now can I get out of what I consider normal and go into another culture, another situation, and be relaxed and go with what is, go with the flow of what is, and trust. So I don't think you said hi 5 times, Susie. At least it didn't come up my screen 5 times. So it wouldn't surprise me that something weird's going on with Facebook. Anyway, am I answering the question, Jen? How can we have a more empowered relationship with money? I think awareness and conscious intent is the biggest ones. And then just being willing to work with it in a curious way, really. Like, the more that we can relax around the concept and not get so contracted or transfixed around having to fix our relationship with money, the better off we're going to be. The more easily we will make progress and relieve ourselves of some of these indoctrinated beliefs that are creating contraction around how much money can flow to us easily without us getting upset, and how we can utilize money and how we can bypass even the importance of money. Another thing that's really helped me is to really understand a little bit deeper about the farcical nature of world economies, the farcical nature of money itself, the fact that money really is a very, very fragile concept in many ways. There is no real value in money. We know that, right? People who have placed themselves in positions of power, and I don't, that's not an under-exaggeration, right? Created federal reserves and talked the government into validating their positions, are basically just printing money, or even just writing more zeros on the end of their spreadsheet, right? They are creating money out of nothing, and then selling it, right? Basically charging people interest to use it. So that's in many parts of the world. M said in Egypt we had to tip for the bathroom, but you had to or couldn't use them countrywide. Yeah, that's in many parts of the world, all through Europe and the Americas. Very rarely do you find a public bathroom that is free to use. And if you go into a cafe or a restaurant to use the bathroom without buying something, then you are expected to pay for that. So that's normal. Although here in New Zealand and Australia, of course, bathrooms are free, and no one would dare charge you to use their bathroom. You said I caused a big scene one time accidentally, only having a large note for them, so I paid that, and one lady cried and one yelled at me while I used the bathroom. Oh my God. Yeah, and that is another big thing, right? Having I found that trying to have appropriate amounts of change, small notes and money available at all times can become quite stressful, especially if we've been in the culture where we just wave our card and everything. Then you go to a cash culture and realize that you have to manage maintaining your change and have to be very strategic about where you use big notes to get change so that you can maintain it in your possession to pay when people didn't have change. It's a whole thing. M said, this is how I've felt my whole life. Been tricky to move into a more authentic mode for me with it. I think it's religious. Stuff, but I was never taught that this life. So it's so insidious though. Yes, correct. I agree. There are many historical or past life or lineage beliefs around money that get passed down reasonably subversively into our culture. Okay. I may have missed that message, Jen. I think you missed this message, Matt. And this is the replay of the message. I think there is some part of me that doesn't want anything to do with money, missing the quote-unquote old ways where money didn't even exist. Also beliefs around how money is misused, abused. Yeah, the idea that money corrupts people is another interesting one that we've all been indoctrinated with. But really, it's not the money that corrupts people, it's the power of having the money that corrupts people. But money has been used in many ways in bad ways. And of course, there's a lot of belief around not being safe to have money because many of us have been robbed and hurt through the robbing process, or even quote unquote killed so that someone else could quote unquote take our money if we had it. So in some ways it's very dangerous to carry money on us because then someone might want to hurt us to get that money. That happened a lot over the last few thousand years, and it still happens today, of course. And so yeah, there are lots of reasons why money seems dangerous or inappropriate, or why we have an aversion to having it, right? That it will corrupt us, or it's icky, or somehow bad, right? Because money has been used. I used to say this: money is the root of all evil, right? It's not true, but it's a saying and it's out there, right? And we've all seen how much the sort of capitalist mentality has raped and pillaged the earth and abused cultures and, a whole thing. Like you go back to Spanish conquistadors coming and taking the gold out of South and Central America. And of course imposing their religion on the peoples and whatnot. The quest for money has created huge amounts of misery and suffering and loss of life on this planet. There is no doubt about that. But money is not at fault. Money is neutral in all of that, right? If we take money away, people will still find something to want to take off other people. They'll take their food, right? And that used to happen as well, because food was as good as money for a long time, and it was no real difference, right? No real difference. People were still, oppressed and robbed of their food before people carried money. So the point is, while our memories are, entangled in this money thing, lack mentality has been creating the opportunity for people to do nasty things to one another for a long time, and to abuse power in all sorts of ways, to oppress others for a long time. So the more that we can be sort of consciously aware of that and disentangle this reality of people abusing their power with the concept of money, so that we can have money and use money, is actually very, very beneficial for our society. Because the point is, heart-centered people, quote unquote, good people, have been resistant on having money, and thus having the power that money brings, right? The spending power that money brings, the advertising power that money brings, the influence that money brings. You can buy things and do good things with money. But many of us who have a good heart and pure intent, or at least purer intent, none of us are 100% pure, right? Purer intent than others on the planet, who don't have such a restriction or resistance around having money, has left the field open for this abuse to keep happening. In many ways, we can see the same thing that's happened in politics, whereas many of us who are heart-centered and very wise in terms of our spiritual maturity have had a real aversion to being in places of politics, right? Of decision making, of governance. We've maintained our distance from our governing bodies, and this has left the door wide open for people of lesser intent, lesser spiritual maturity, to take over, right, and to run the country. And then we sort of have to deal with the consequences of that, right? And so it's important now, I believe, as we are, rapidly expanding in the vibration here on the planet, that we get over some of these aversions and start to allow ourselves to become curious and to contemplate how we can become more influential on the planet. One of those ways is to have and use money more wisely and more expansively. And another is to allow ourselves to move into spheres of greater influence, e.g. political influence and governance influence. Wilma said, currently experiencing tooth pain that feels tied to money struggles, scarcity. I love it if you could heal it. Yeah, I bet you could love it if I could heal it. Unfortunately, Wilma, I don't believe very strongly in this idea that someone can just heal something that is basically there to help you grow. Pain is a great motivator. And I know pain is also a big limitation. Yeah, I can definitely help you become more clear on what needs to happen for that tooth pain to be alleviated through you changing your relationship with various aspects of life. Yeah, I can definitely help the energy that is currently stuck to be alleviated and to flow more effectively. But I can't just heal something that is basically showing up to help you. And I believe everything that's shown up to help you. Things don't just go wrong, right? As you said, you're feeling tooth pain that feels tied to money, struggle, scarcity. So the tooth pain is actually helping to bring your attention to your disempowered relationship with money and scarcity and lack mentality, so that you can fix that. You can change that yourself. And the way that you change that yourself is through consciously choosing to align with abundance, despite the fact that you've been programmed with lack. That's difficult. And unfortunately, that difficulty is the price we pay for growth. We're not here just to be fixed and all of a sudden be living our most expansive expression of self, because what's the point of that? We've come here to engage in a process that creates real wisdom in ourselves. And that process of growth, that process of struggle, if you like. I'm not saying that we're here necessarily have to struggle through everything, but we're here to grow and learn. It's like a child. If you do everything for a child, they basically become useless because they've never had to do anything for themselves. So we have to give people, all people, including our children, an appropriate level of responsibility to do things for themselves so that they gain the capacity to do things for themselves. And that's the point, right? Wilma said, interestingly enough, it started when I felt I was about to step into flow finally, but clearly part of me is not ready to let go. Yeah. And so that's an awesome awareness. And this is very common, that when we feel that we have the capacity to do something beyond what we've done before, right? Something that's expansive, we quite often find a quite intense pushback arises. You could say, some last ditch effort from the limitation to assert itself arises. But it's not like it's some sort of mental game. It's just energy mechanics, right? As your vibration lifts into that state of flow and you feel that you're finally aligning with it, that elevated vibration basically pushes to the surface or reveals density that's still in your field, right? And it comes out, it manifests as part of its expression. So the manifestation of this tooth pain is really the process of releasing some deep limiting or dense vibration that's been in your field for goodness knows how many lifetimes. So the point is not to make the tooth pain wrong. Do what you can to alleviate it. Maintain your focus on abundance consciousness and visualize or align yourself with the vibration of being free in that flow, right? Don't get caught up in thinking you need to fix something before you are ready to let go. Letting go is always a process. We're never ready. We're never ready. I talk a lot with, people who are stepping into using their gifts more out in the world. And there's this danger that people keep saying, well, I don't feel ready. We never feel ready. I didn't feel ready when I began either. And I still don't feel ready every time I do anything new. That's the point, right? We have to be willing to do things before we feel ready. And we do experience resistance. And we quite often do fail in our first few attempts to do anything because we're not ready, but we're choosing to do it anyway. That's the point. You can't just keep working in the background trying to get ready so that when you do something, you don't fail. That's delusional, right? That's not going to happen. We are all going to fail when we first try and do anything, and that includes being abundant with money. We fail, right? We get ourselves into trouble. We overspend. We dance this dance where we deal with all sorts of perceived mistakes or failure experiences or discomforts as we choose to be more abundant in the world, right? As we choose to be more abundant, and we have these various protests coming up in our face, and that's just part of the process. It's the same with everything else. We choose to be more intimate and interact with people in a more open and vulnerable way. We get hurt, and then we think that we've made a mistake in doing that. Oh, I'm never going to open my heart again. No. Be willing to get hurt. It's part of the process of growth. It's the same. You're surfing, you want to surf bigger waves, you're going to get wiped out and it's going to hurt. You want to climb rocks and you want to go up the grades of what rock face you can get up, you are going to fall from time to time and it's going to hurt, right? When you swing around on that rope and smack back into the wall, it hurts, right? But that's the price we pay for choosing to improve in any particular skill. You can say the same playing the piano. If you want to play better and better pieces, you have to practice and you have to be willing to make mistakes. It doesn't hurt quite as much when you make wrong notes on the piano, but it can get quite frustrating. I'm just not speaking from experience because I've never tried to play the piano because I know I'd be complete crap at it, to be honest. Some of us are gifted in some ways and some not. But the point is, my friends, and I have a feeling I've gone way over time, just for a change. Yeah. The point is, my friends, improving our relationship with anything, improving ourselves in any way, we have to be willing to step through a process that involves making mistakes, having perceived failure experiences, experiencing pain in some way. We have to be willing to unearth these resistances and have them come right up in our face and then still maintain our attention, right? Maintain our attention on our intended outcome, to keep striving forward, to keep aligning our energy with the outcome that we desire, whether that's abundance consciousness, whether that's a space of confidence, internal confidence that we're able to be more intimate or more vulnerable or whatever, right? Whatever we're trying to achieve, whatever we desire in our heart to achieve, we have to be willing to work through a process to get there. There's no quick fix. There's no doing magic. Yeah, you can do affirmations. Yeah, you can do all stuff, and it all helps. It all helps, but it won't get you there on its own. Ultimately, you have to be willing to step into it before you feel ready, and you have to be willing to risk, not just risk having failures, but actually experience having failures. That's it. All successful people, no matter what field we are talking about, have failed in their process of getting to what we now call success. They've all had failure experiences. That's the point. We have to get over our resistance to failing and allow it to happen, and even celebrate it happening as an indication of our own bravery, as an indication of our own commitment and dedication to the process of improvement, self-improvement, spiritual evolution, ascension, whatever you want to call it. The process will involve perceived failures and various pains arising as we step through. Hopefully that helps, my friends. Apologies if I've missed any comments along the way. It does happen. Oh yeah, there it was. Okay, much love. Oh yeah, so I'm coming back on in like 2.25 hours because it's new moon. New moon will be exact in about less than 3 hours time. It's at about 12:30 my time. But anyway, the point is coming back on with a free light language facilitation, transmission, on the topic of healing and using love to heal. Utilizing this new moon. It's 12/12 in most of the world still, which is a numerological gateway, and it's also Mercury going into retrograde today, which is reasonably interesting because it stays in retrograde right the way through to the 1st of 2024, 1st of January. So we're completing this year in Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde, a lot of people get all woo-woo about it and say, don't plan this, don't plan that. It doesn't have to be like that at all. It's not a negative thing. It's actually an opportunity to become more inward, more internal, more intuitive with how we deal with the world. And so I think that's an awesome opportunity for us all, and we'd like to facilitate something around that. So if you have time, in a couple of hours' time, I've sent it out. If you're on Facebook, which you are because you're watching me on a live stream, unless you're watching this on YouTube in the future. But yeah, it'll just be below this, the notification to that instant teleseminar link. And if I put this on YouTube, which I probably will, I can put it in there as well, couldn't I? The link to the replay, because it will still be valid. Anyway, my friends, much love. I'll speak to you again next week. Bye for now.